It's been 3 weeks since Mafia the Old Country was released, and a lot of gamers are expecting downloadable content for Mafia the Old Country, specifically DLCs that expand the game's story. After completing Mafia TOC, people either loved the story or hated it. Some call the story a masterpiece, while others called it unsatisfying and want closure in the form of a story DLC. So will we get a story DLC for Mafia TOC? First, we have to look at the history of 2K games and see when they announced story DLCs for the previous Mafia games. Mafia 2 was the first Mafia game in the franchise to introduce DLCs. Mafia 2 has 3 story DLCs: The Betrayal of Jimmy, Jimmy's Vendetta, and Joe's Adventures. The first 2 DLCs are not canon to the Mafia game universe and have a very limited number of cutscenes. All 3 of these story DLCs consist of arcade-style timed missions with a point-based system, complete with online leaderboards. The Betrayal of Jimmy DLC was a Day 1 PlayStation 3 exclusive that was available upon the game's release on August 24, 2010. This DLC was included for free in brand new PS3 copies via voucher code. Alternatively, players could purchase the DLC for $9.99 on the PlayStation Store. Jimmy's Vendetta DLC, the second story DLC for Mafia 2, was officially announced on August 31, 2010, 7 days after Mafia 2 was released, and the DLC released on September 7th, 14 days after launch. This DLC was available on Steam and the PlayStation Store for $9.99, and on the Xbox Live Marketplace, it was 800 Microsoft points. Joe's Adventures DLC was announced on September 16, 2010, 23 days after Mafia 2 was released, and the DLC released on November 23, 2010, 91 days after launch. This DLC was available on Steam and the PlayStation Store for $9.99, and on the Xbox Live Marketplace, it was 800 Microsoft points. Mafia 2 had a total of 3 story DLCs that were released on Day 1, 14 days later, and 91 days after launch. Mafia 3 had 3 story DLCs: Faster Baby, Stones Unturned, and Sign of the Times. Unlike Mafia 2, all 3 story DLCs for Mafia 3 were announced prior to the game's release. On September 3, 2016 at PAX West, Hangar 13 announced 3 story expansion DLCs for Mafia 3. The game wouldn't be released until 34 days later, on October 7, 2016. There was even a season pass you could pre-purchase for $29.99 that included all 3 story expansion packs. Faster Baby DLC released on March 28, 2017, 172 days after launch. Stones Unturned DLC released on May 30, 2017, 235 days after launch. And Sign of the Times released on July 25, 2017, 291 days after launch. Mafia 3 had a total of 3 story DLCs that were released 172 days, 235 days, and 291 days after launch. Mafia Definitive Edition had a total of 0 story DLCs. It makes sense because Mafia 1 Classic had no downloadable content. So what about Mafia the Old Country? According to Video Game Insights by Sensor Tower, Mafia the Old Country sold over 800,000 units in its first 5 days. PlayStation accounted for 48.67% of total sales, while Steam contributed to 37.86% and Xbox at 13.47%. The game's reception shows that both PC and console audiences have embraced the title, making for a successful multi-platform debut. 2K Games in their Free Ride blog post said, "We'd like to thank you, our passionate and fiercely loyal community, for making the launch of Mafia the Old Country a success. It appears Mafia TOC made Take-Two Interactive a profit after all expenses were deducted." Despite Mafia the Old Country being a success according to 2K Games, it appears there will be 0 story DLCs for Mafia the Old Country. Mafia TOC will have one big final free update for all players where they will add a free ride mode with new activities and gameplay content, and that's it. The game won't receive any significant updates after that. Sorry for the disappointing news. The developers did state numerous times prior to the game's release that Mafia TOC was in the same scope as Mafia Definitive Edition. The price of the game being $49.99 should have been a big hint to not expect any story expansion packs. This was a linear game from day one that told Enzo Favara's story from start to finish. Adding a story DLC where we play as Leo Galante, Sam Trapani, or Cesare Masato would take away from the importance of the game's main story. If you enjoyed Mafia the Old Country, you should be happy there are no story DLCs, because if anything, it makes more sense for them to create a brand new game, perhaps a direct sequel to Mafia the Old Country set in Empire Bay, a Mafia 2 prequel. At the Future Games Show Summer Showcase, Nick Baines, president of Hank 13, said, "Mafia the Old Country is both a prequel to the original Mafia trilogy, and it also sets things up for what might be to come in the future."
Mafia the Old Country is both a prequel to the original Mafia trilogy, and it also sets things up for what might be to come in the future. And it also sets things up for what might be to come in the future. And it also sets things up for what might be to come in the future.
Who knows? Maybe Isabella will make a cameo in the next Mafia game if it's a Mafia 2 prequel. Let me know down in the comments what you think about this. Do you want to see another prequel game? Or do you want to see a sequel to Mafia 3? Let me know in the comments below. For the latest Mafia Game news, updates, and content, subscribe to Mafia Game videos.